Thank you, Raquel. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and even some of you, good night. A really warm welcome to this event. Thank you for joining us. Um, it's going to be a heavy event in the sense of the topic that we're going to be talking about. But I hope that in this heaviness, there will also be seeds of hope about humanity and about our role in the world. We live in a violent, in a fragmented, in a fractured world. There are now over 130 state-based and non-state conflicts. And in fact, seemingly every day, there are even more. Not since the 1990s has the world been experiencing so many conflicts and so many high-intensity conflicts or war. Some countries are also at civil war, and not just a civil war between two parties and one front line. There are sometimes two or three or even four frontline conflicts just in one country. And the number of people killed has been increasing now for the last few years. Last year, there were over 240,000 people killed in the conflicts. And these are protracted conflicts, many of them. So there's a constant state of violence. And this constant state of violence means that there's a continual cycle of fear. A cycle of fear for children, cycle of fear for families, cycle of fear for communities caught up in this conflict, caught between two warring parties. So you can imagine that fear in a community, maybe in a village in the middle of woods or forests or jungle or desert or dry land, when you can hear gunfire in the distance in the night and thinking that soldiers are coming and you've got to run in the opposite direction. Sounds overhead of drones. You can hear them now if you watch the news, and some of you will be able to hear them now if you open your window. Drones overhead. Drones ready to strike. Fear. Sirens warning to flee. Go down to the shelter. Sirens warning to flee. Leave your village. And then bombs exploding. Maybe you're in a city or a town, and the noise of the bomb, the device, echoes off the walls and into your family home. This is the new normal for so many people now. And it takes arguably 20, maybe even 50 years for a community or a country to recover. 50 years to economically recover from a protracted conflict. 50 years for a country to recover politically, legally, and environmentally. Think of the damage done to nature. But how about for society? How about for people? How about for children and their children and their children? The trauma of conflict ripples down through generations. It doesn't necessarily disappear after a decade or after 50 years. In fact, just a quick personal story is that my great-grandfather was killed in war, 1916. My grandmother hadn't been born at that time. She was going to be born 3 months after he died. And that has rippled down through my grandmother, through my mother, and to me. I carry it around with me. And yet that's just one story out of so many thousands, out of so many millions, and think that's over 110 years ago now. Sphere was born out of conflict. The many thousands of people fleeing the terrible genocide in Rwanda, going to Goma, going across the border to DR Congo. Sphere does not exist for times of peace. Sphere doesn't exist for times of prosperity. Now, the Humanitarian Charter is born out of human rights, the UN Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, international humanitarian law, international law. And the Humanitarian Charter is the first and the cornerstone chapter and foundation of the Sphere Handbook. Before we get to the technical aspects, we read the Charter, where it talks about for life with dignity, where it talks about the right to receive humanitarian assistance, the right to protection and security. And these rights are all based on what we used to call norms and principles, that during armed conflict, there is the principle of distinction between civilians and combatants, the principle of proportionality, the principle of precaution. And yet, more so now, but consistently, schools have been targeted. Hospitals have been targeted. Civilian structures, civilians, targeted. There's no accountability anymore. And yet, no matter how angry we get and how much we rage against this violence and the impunity of the violence, it seemingly gets worse and continues. There's so much unnecessary suffering in the world. And with this, we're now going to hand over to people who live this day to day. I'm going to read out their biographies now, and we're delighted that they can join us to share some of their experiences, both living in conflict and how they are able to undertake humanitarian assistance in conflict. Our first speaker is Jonas from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Jonas founded
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, William. It's a pleasure to meet and sharing my experiences for Democratic Republic of Congo. To be honest, as William, you said, Democratic Republic of Congo is one of affected by armed conflict for several years, 25 years now, living conflict and working, implementing humanitarian interventions in a very complex situations. From 1994, when genocide in Rwanda have been organized, we have been receiving more refugees in Congo, Democratic Republic. And from this period, the country has more than 120 active armed groups. And the Goma sometimes was like a capital of NGOs because of the crisis. But depending to responses we are doing, sphere standards are under fire because we are implementing several projects and programs, but sometimes there is no impact because of this cycle of conflict. While donors have been investing more money, responding to crisis in DRC, but impact is a problem for now. And we have been using humanitarian standards, especially sphere standards, to improve the situations. For example, from my case, while myself I'm a victim of attacks, kidnappings, and everything with my team as a national NGO, really, we have been impacted by these situations. But we have been developing our self-resilience, and the sphere standards have been helping us to do as we can, as much as possible. The specific cases, for example, when we need to go to implement our programs, we use humanitarian principles, neutrality, humanity, impartiality, and operational independence in negotiating access. I have very good examples in areas where armed groups have been occupying for many years, where schools have been closed, but using humanitarian principles, we have been going there, negotiating armed groups to have access in these areas, and we have been able to have successfully need assessment, successful implementation of project by using humanitarian principles. This is one. But also, depending to high needs, we have been using sphere standards to assess the needs of these affected people, designing our project but also under implementation of our programs. For example, meeting 7.5 to 15 liters of water for many of displaced people was a challenge because of the number of people in need. While we have been responding, it was not really easy to reach these standards related to wash and sanitation in IDP settlements. And in terms of food security also, it was not sometimes not really easy to meet these standards because of the high number of people in needs, but you have been trying to do as much as possible. And from our organization as a sphere trainer and focal point in the DRC, we have been sometimes organizing training to government authorities. We have been educating people from the government army, and we sometimes also give messages related to humanitarian standards to these armed people, armed groups, the leaders, to ensure that humanitarian people can be protected in the context of this conflict. And sometimes also we need to congratulate all these NGOs working, implementing programs in this particular context where no one sometimes can not be accepting to go. As the humanitarian charter, as we are using also the humanitarian internal law, we have a mandate, we have responsibility to go there because we have to save lives and we are doing much as possible. As a national NGO, we are there for helping people and we need to be more equipped, we need to be more supported, we need to be more coordinated, we need to be more equipped, but we are there at the front line and we not give up depending on the situation we are living. Thank you very much. I think if participants will have any feedback, we'll have a moment to give you also some other thought about this topic. Thank you very much, William, Raquel, and the Sphere team for organizing this particular session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonas. It's very kind of you to share. And yeah, if you want to put any questions or comments or your thoughts into the chat, you're very welcome to do so. We will have a bit of time at the end and we'll hopefully come to them. So thank you. That was Jonas. We now hand over to John, who's based in Myanmar at the moment, who's a humanitarian program coordinator with the Ketchen Development Group. He's got experience since 2016 specializing in many sectors, including wash and food security and mental health, and expertise in safeguarding and PSEA and quality and accountability. So he's conducting many trainings, he's conducting workshops and advocacy initiatives across Myanmar, and we're very honored for you to be with us here now. Over to you, John.
Hello, can you hear me, William?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, William. Thank you for a wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a good night from Myanmar. As earlier William introduced, my name is John Turing from the Kitchen Development Group, one of humanitarian organization, Kitchen State Myanmar. And I'm also working as a sphere trainer, as the contacting sphere training, promoting humanitarian quality and accountability, and also humanitarian advocacy initiated across the Myanmar, especially in Kitchen State. As we all know, Myanmar is today one of our largest humanitarian crisis country in the world. Currently, over 60 million people, of which is 1/3 of population in the country, is currently being in the need of humanitarian assistance. Over 4 million people have been displaced across the country with multiple times. And then also with being in a huge challenge for assisting adequate humanitarian assistance. Its intensity is already accelerated by the accelerating armed conflicts across the country, and also extreme limited funding for humanitarian assistance, and also the risk of the humanitarian organization and humanitarian worker are being extremely targeted and arrested across the country. And then also uh, all to the humanitarian assistance and in across the country is now being in the big gap in the lack of the humanitarian assistance. It's barely reaches to the minimum standard that we are currently. And such in the midst of the such the crisis, KDG, one of the humanitarian organization, and in the Myanmar now we are delivering humanitarian assistance to address the need of community by applying the humanitarian standard. I would like to share some of our experimentally project story that we are currently conducted by applying humanitarian standard. In the mid of 2025, all of our due to the armed conflict across our project area, our community and our targeted area were unable to reach and unable to accept. And then all of our staff were also unable to travel and being the high risk of the insecurity. So which this situation in fact us about to the stop of our program operation and also the community impact to the more vulnerable by the stopping assistance. To address these challenges, we directly apply for humanitarian standards CHS commitment 3. People and community are prepared, are better prepared and better respond to the potential crisis. This apply as this standard, this commitment into the practice. We modify our program into the humanitarian, community-led humanitarian action, such as we organize community leader, women and youth leader, and religious leader from all of our targeted area. And then we organize and we deliver SPIA and humanitarian minimum standard training. And then we train them. And we conducted ongoing and coaching and ongoing mental support to those community leader and community representative. And then we assisting them to develop their own life-saving action plan for their community with their own by the applying this training minimum standard, SPIA standard. As a post-training, now they have been increased the knowledge. Now they know how to make sure nutrition 2,100 kilo per person, and how to ensure water quality and water quantity for life saving. And then they now increase the knowledge why this community voice and heart is very important thing. So now the community they already have all of their knowledge, humanitarian knowledge, and what all of the capacity they have been and they already increased. Now even some of our target area one is the very difficult to reach. For we are absent for traveling for this area now. We are no longer to concern the community. They are better prepared for themselves. Now they are ready for their action plan. We are just only need to support some of the financial or some of the technical. So community is already prepared for themselves for their action. This is the very important, and this is very important for very crucial important lesson learned for our organization by applying humanitarian standard, co-humanitarian and co-humanitarian standard. And based on this project and based on this evidence study, we surely know that this humanitarian standard is not only effective for humanitarian organization, not only for humanitarian practitioner, humanitarian worker, but it is really, really effective and really important for the community themselves. Now they have been already know about what is the humanitarian standard, why they have to be known. Now they already know their right to assess the humanitarian standard, why it is important. And then based on this, the story, this is significantly projected that even in the difficult situation, in the very difficult conflict situation, the standard is the more relevant. In the more conflict situation, standard is more relevant for community and for the humanitarian worker. This is also the now humanitarian standard. Everything the humanitarian standard, minimum standard is the very effective for the Myanmar humanitarian worker and also Myanmar community to ensure their life and dignity, and also to address the current Myanmar extremely humanitarian crisis. Uh, that's why I would like to recommend this standard is the more relevant in more conflict setting. And then standard is not only effective for humanitarian practitioners, it's also very, very effective for community themselves, to train them, to advocate them, to orientate them, to capacity building them for humanitarian standard for themselves. Thank you so much. And if you have any question and feedback, I think I would like to be very happy to be this one. Thank you, William.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John Routing. That's fantastic of you to share. And as John said, please put in the chat if you have any questions or comments or feedback. And thank you, Paula. It's seeing your feedback there, and wonderful that you're in the virtual room with us. It's a real privilege. Mahmoud, we've gone from DR Congo to Myanmar. Now we're going to Gaza. An extraordinary wonders of Zoom in a way. So we're very privileged to hear people who are on the front line. So Mahmoud is in Gaza at the moment. He's not going to turn his video on. He hasn't got good connection for many reasons. Mahmoud works with humanity and inclusion. He's the inclusive education manager. He's also a listed sphere trainer, and he specializes in contextualizing the Humanitarian Charter, the CHS, protection principles, and sector standards. Mahmoud holds a master's degree from Tulane University in the States and a bachelor's in pharmacy, University of Gaza. Mahmoud, I hope you can hear us, and we're going to hand over to you now.
Yes, thank you, William, for this opportunity, and actually I appreciate that. I just wanted to say hello for everyone from the middle of the darkness right now, since we run out of electricity for about 3 years so far. Among all these circumstances and civilians assassinated, including children and women, are standards still relevant? Let's see through the presentation that I have already recorded as a contingency plan for this meeting, since we used to have our A to Z contingency plans in our daily routine. Thank you. Go ahead for the presentation if possible. Thank you. Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I speak today from Gaza, not only as a practitioner, but as someone who has witnessed what happens when minimum standards confront systemic collapse. Next slide, please. When we speak about minimum humanitarian standards in conflict, we often frame them as technical benchmarks. But in Gaza, however, the WASH standards, for instance, the standards that we are going to talk about today, became a daily ethical negotiation. The sphere sets a minimum of 15 liters per person per day to cover drinking, cooking, and basic hygiene. But during the escalation, we were struggling to secure even a fraction of that. The question was no longer
how do we meet the standard. It became how do we protect dignity when the minimum is not physically possible. Next, please. Gaza, you know, is not only an acute emergency setting. It's a protracted, access-constrained, highly density urban context. In Gaza, for instance, the water infrastructure is heavily dependent on electricity and the fuel. Desalination plants and pumping stations stop when fuel runs out. Access restrictions delay spare parts and chlorine. Infrastructure is damaged during hostilities. Displacement into schools and shelters increased demands overnight. At the peak of escalation, municipal supply dropped dramatically. Water trucking became the primary source. Fuel scarcity limited pumping capacity. Hundreds of thousands were displaced into overcrowded shelters. Demand surged, supply collapsed. Next, please. You know, to come to the practical reality, in several shelters, water availability dropped to between 3 to 7 liters per person per day. In some cases, less. The queues lasted hours. Women and children were disproportionately affected, particularly those with disabilities. Domestic hygiene became almost impossible. The impossible choice emerged: if we prioritize drinking water, there is little left for hand washing. Toilets cannot be flushed. Menstrual hygiene becomes severely compromised. If we allocate for sanitation, for instance, drinking consumption drops below survival levels. Sphere tells us what should be achieved. The conflict dictated what was physically available. We had to prioritize the most vulnerable, sequence water distribution, combine water tracking with hygiene kits, advocate consistently for fuel access, monitor protection risks around water points. But even with all efforts, we didn't reach 15 liters. Next, please. You know, it comes to the ethical issues and ethical tension. The hardest part was not the logistics, it was the normalization risk. When operating for months below standards, there is a danger that 5 liters becomes acceptable. We ask ourselves, are we adapting or lowering expectations? At what point does the contextualization become compromised? How transparent should we be about gaps? We decided on 3 principles: never redefine the minimum, document and communicate the gap clearly, use standards as an advocacy tool, not only a programming guide. The standard became leveraged in coordination meetings, in donor reporting, in advocacy for fuel entry. All in all, the critical question becomes, when the operational ceiling is below the global minimum, what is the rule of the standard? Is still relevant, or does it become symbolic? In Gaza, we found that its relevance increased actually, precisely because it's unmet. Next, please. You know, water scarcity is not only a public health issue, it becomes a protection risk, a gender issue, a dignity issue. Overcrowded shelters with insufficient water led to tension, unsafe sanitation conditions, increased burden on women. Even when we couldn't meet quantitative targets, we focused on safe water point management, lighting and crowd control, gender-sensitive distribution schedules, community communications. Next, please. You know, when it comes to the lessons learned about our experience, from this experience, I would highlight many lessons. First, preparedness is critical. Pre-positioning fuel and repair material matters more than ever. Second, standards must remain aspirational anchors. They prevent the gradual erosion of quality. Third, transparency builds credibility. Hiding shortfalls, weakness, collective advocacy. Minimum standards are negotiation tools. They strengthen humanitarian diplomacy. And fourth, the dignity must remain central even when numbers fail. Next, please. Finally, in Gaza, we often couldn't meet 15 liters, but we never stopped referring to it because minimum standards are not about achieving perfection in war. They are about refusing to normalize deprivation. Even under fire, standards remind us all the time what people are entitled to, not what they are forced to accept. Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
My thanks to you, Mahmoud, for that very powerful presentation and sharing of the reality that is in Gaza and continues to be so. Again, I'm going to say that if you'd like to make a question or a comment, please do so in the chat, and we'll have some time for feedback later. Okay, so now we're handing over to Dina. Dina is a professional certified trainer, member of the International Association of Facilitators. She serves as head of the supervisory board of the Your Support Charitable Foundation. She's a sphere coordinator in Ukraine and teaches project management at the Ukrainian Catholic University. She's also the author of the Curly Management Methodology. Dina, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and we hand over to you.
Thank you, William. It's a pleasure being here, and I guess today's variety of the cases that we're discussing actually is a showcase of what's happening in the world right now and how diverse humanitarian contexts may be. When talking about sphere, I usually use the cards that I have, and I really like to show them, explaining that sphere standards are not about indicators. They are about people that actually have what they need, and they got it with dignity and with all the support that they needed. I have a small presentation. However, I'm not sure this will be working out. You see my screen, right? Great, it's working. Okay, so I will try to share more on how we promote sphere standards in Ukraine rather than how we implement, though there will be a few cases. Your Support via Pora is a charitable foundation that works in Ukraine for 11 years now, and we restore, strengthen, and build systems that guarantee social and humanitarian support to those who need it most. We work with systems, and we have 5 strategic pillars in our strategy, which is healthcare, food security and livelihoods, protection, shelter and housing, child protection, and education. And we work throughout Ukraine. We have many hospitals that we're supporting. We're also a World Heart Federation and validated CAF International. But also we are a member of Alliance of Ukrainian CSOs and Sphere Focal Point in Ukraine. A little bit of Ukrainian context, what you should know, maybe you didn't know, that there is a full scale war or invasion, how we call it, that lasts for 4 years, but there are 11 years of military operations in Ukraine. We have mass displacement, infrastructure destruction, huge protection needs, and a very important point is that there were a few purely humanitarian organizations in Ukraine with relevant experience when the humanitarian crisis erupted in 2014. And we are in protracted conflict, and we're developing this capacity over the years. The main challenges that we have faced over these years in promoting sphere standards is the funding gap. Donors rarely allocate specific funding for promotion of standards, and standards are expected to be known And at the same time, among local actors, many implementers, including state actors, actually are not familiar with sphere standards. Standards are often perceived as theoretical, not contextual indicators rather than operational tools, as I said. And this creates a dangerous illusion of compliance without capacity. Despite localization statement many donors actually have, they treat local organizations as implementers, which leading local humanitarian actors to design their strategies based on donor priorities. As a result, comprehensive needs assessments are often skipped or simplified. Responses are shaped by funding lines, not by holistic needs. And very few actors operate within a humanitarian development nexus mindset. Standards become secondary to budget architecture. Formal coordination structures exist and design coordinated interventions, but at the same time, not all funding and interventions, at least in Ukraine, are represented there. There are many actors that are not in the system, registered there, and not being showcased. However, real coordination happens locally. Field actors are the ones negotiating practical solutions, and without shared standards, coordination becomes reactive rather than principled. And we see that local coordination is strong, and area-based coordination, ABC, is actually key to success. A few cases. We operated a transit shelter in Lviv that worked fully in line with sphere standards. This was validated by donors. We integrated employment support to people, provided psychosocial assistance, and it was even closed according to the standards. What we see now is that many shelters in the western part of Ukraine are closing, and not only there, across the country, because no transition models were built. Donor priorities shifted towards central and eastern regions, and exit strategies were not integrated from the beginning. And we see that standards must include transition thinking. Today, we also run a family mental well-being center in Kyiv region. This is a real photo of this center, and this is a certified bomb shelter where children from liberated territories receive comprehensive psychosocial support, educational catch-up programs, long-term stabilization support. And the funding model for that is predominantly supported by businesses with support of local community. And we see this as nexus in action. This is humanitarian actors working with development and local ownership. For example, we provide infant reanimation vehicles for hospitals in Ukraine. We approached several organizations focused on NGO development capacity building, proposing training of trainers on sphere. The response was consistent, not a priority at the moment. And standards are often treated as optional, not as infrastructure. We had, though, training of trainers of sphere by ourselves in 2024. 2 of them are already sphere-listed trainers and conduct trainings across Ukraine. More than 20 sphere trainings were conducted last year. And for example, tomorrow I have CHS training, and later this month I will be in Odessa with sphere training. Instead of waiting for top-down prioritization, we build a bottom-up demand system. Organizations approach trainers directly for sphere trainings. They allocate funding from their organizational development budgets. Standards become part of internal capacity building, not external compliance requirement. We say that we added market logic to advocacy component, people coming to us asking for trainings and not we're getting grants for these trainings. Lessons learned. Standards do not spread through declarations. They spread through incentives and practical examples. If donors do not fund standards, local actors must embed them into organizational culture and shape up donor policies. That's what we are professional already in, and actually, I really support the message from Gaza that we should use the standards as a language when shaping up donor policies. For example, we can refer to CHS Commitment 1 when they send us their documentation in English, when in Ukraine you need to have all the documentation in Ukrainian, and we refer to CHS saying that you have to provide an interpreter translation of these documents and make them two language. Nexus thinking requires proper financial management capacity, funding flexibility, and long-term design. And true coordination starts with shared professional language. Any advice, I don't know, to humanitarian networks and donors? Earmark funding for standards dissemination and localization, especially in a context where there were no humanitarian experience before that. Integrate sphere into state-level humanitarian mechanisms. Support transition models from emergency to recovery. Invest in local coordination and system infrastructure, not only project implementers. Standards are not luxury, they are architecture of dignity, and that's why I love them, because I work with the topic of values a lot. And my closing message would be this: the humanitarian community does not lack commitment, and it does not lack courage. And we see this in all the cases that we have just discussed. However, it needs contextualized approach to humanitarian response, especially in urban settings. And what we see now is actually showing us that contexts are different, and standard indicators not explained through values could be understood as just requirements by someone who doesn't understand the situation. And we are ready to share this experience, and you are not alone. And I hope our experience will be for those who are just coming to this stuff. Thank you. Дякую.
Thank you so much, Dina. Thank you. And Dina's speaking from Kiev at the moment. So very glad to have you with us. Thank you very, very much. And some great comments coming in as well. So last but by no means least, we have Faris. Faris Razek is the Meals Senior Coordinator at Shafak Organization and is the co-chair of the AAP Working Group in Syria. It's contributing to coordination and shared learning across organizations, where he focuses on strengthening quality and accountability in multi-sector humanitarian interventions, ensuring that evidence and feedback mechanisms translate into improved services for affected communities. What a wonderful bio that is. Thank you, Faris, and over to you.
Thank you, William. Just let me share my screen. Okay, good evening from Turkey. I start a different introduction, but when I heard from my colleague the different experience, and thank for sharing that, I will say, please stay safe in the conflict area that you are working on it. I will go directly just to save time, how we are applying sphere standard in the health sector in Syria. Specifically in one of the most important specialized facility in Syria, in a geographical area covering more than 400,000 people from IDPs and host community. Before we start, just to give you a brief about Syria. Syria just was suffering for more than 14 years from the conflict. And during that time, 5 million of people immigrated or externally IDP displaced. More than 7 million internally displaced. More than 500,000 have been killed, and up to 200,000 people are missed up to now. And adding to that, more than 600 health facilities have been attacked by Assad regime at that time. So just focusing on the health situation on Syria, there is like really a huge gap. And I remember when we in 2012, when I started working as a humanitarian worker, there is no guidance for me. The idea how to serve the people, they are just displaced, especially for when you are seeing some people are sick and you cannot provide them with the needed services. So really, there is like a huge gap in health system. And adding to that, most of the skilled staff have been immigrated and traveled abroad. So even the supply chain is unstable. So the situation isn't that time isn't so good. So the environment, the minimum standard are not theoretical at that time. When we start building in my organization Shafaq, which is like a Syrian organization operated from Turkey, but now we are operating from Syria. We asked ourselves one question: if we want to start from the minimum standards, what must exist? So there was like sphere. So my presentation will focus on the technical side and protection accountability side on sphere and how we applied those principles to build a good health system where the people can get their services with the dignity, with the protection as needed. You know, sphere is focusing on the provided services and what is the minimum for the health services to be provided. Actually, in the location that I'm presenting now, which is Marat Masrin in Idlib in northwest Syria, the most vulnerable people in the area are women and children. And even there is like many health mobile clinic, many PHCs, but they are not providing specialized services for women, especially for pregnant and lactating women and for children. So the system within this hospital is built to show the integration among the services. For an example, there is like a productive health services. There is a pediatrician services, and also we have the nutrition with establishing SAM stabilization center with a very safe referral pathway. And the good practice in Syria it isn't easy and it is sensitive to talk about GBV, how you are going to provide such type of services without stigma, without do harm for the people. So there is like detached the WGSS center to the hospital. So the people came to the reproductive health hospital, but they are referring to the GBV center without affecting them. Technically, if we wanted to provide a reproductive health center, I'm not a technical and I'm not a doctor, but within the sphere standard, I understand that there is like some minimum services should be provided under this service. For an example, the service should be provided 24/7, comprehensive emergency obstetric care, C-sections, blood transfusion. So imagine that we have like a C-section, but we cannot transfer blood within the hospital, ANC, PNC, and adding to that the family planning with confidential critical management of rape. And the sphere support us just to advocate for the donor the importance of providing this package of these services. Same for the pediatrician we have in the hospital now. After like 10 years of supporting this hospital, even the pediatric surgeries in the same center, and that came from following the minimum standards required within the sphere and advocate that within the donor and even within the stakeholder at that time controlling the area. It's very critical if you are dealing with the pregnant lactating women and with children to deal with SAM situation and the child who have like a complicated nutrition status. So we have established stabilization center at the hospital. And for the GBV, we are providing like many services, but the main important thing, how to refer the GBV cases or survivor cases between the hospital and the center in a safe way. So technically, the technical standard have been operationalized in the center in a good way, following the sphere standard. And here, like some real photo taken from the last month from the hospital. This is like lovely smile for this kid, and you feel how much you are happy when you are providing such type of services for life saving for those people. The another one, it's like an intel care for diagnostic capacity within the hospital. This one, C-section, it's provided 24/7 in the hospital. And if you notice in the Syrian, you know the context. If you are not familiar with it, it isn't easy for the female to be diagnosed by a male doctor. So finding a female staff wasn't easy, and it was like a challenge for many things. So in this picture, both of them are doctors, doctor and with midwives. Also, we have like a newborn receiving specialized care inside the neonatal incubator through 3 kids in this one. And you know, Sphere is not focusing only on the technical side. If we are providing the services technically, but how we are going to provide these services, we need to focus on the protection side in the gender sensitive and safe access, and ensure the governance and accountability in considering the core humanitarian standards. Actually, we suffered a lot just to reach what we are doing now, because it's like a context not familiar with the crisis, many armed group controlling the area, many actors, you need to coordinate with them. But after years of coordination, capacity building for the main actors, working with WHO, we now, I can say, we are providing the services, integrated services with confidential and safe. And for sure, we have like a gender, and the protection focal point is responsible for following up not only for this whole them among the health facilities supported by Shafaq. For gender sensitive as well, we support the health facility with the female doctors and midwives, and it isn't easy to find, as I said, a specialized doctor at this state, because most of the doctor immigrated abroad. So what we did in Syria, there is like a program to build the capacity of some medical background people to be like as a midwife or nurses. So they start providing them with the special courses. So start supporting the doctors within the hospital. In this hospital, we have like 4 doctors and 7 midwives as well. For the governance and accountability, I'm like a meal background and AAB working group co-chair. And this is one of the best things that we established in Syria. We have like an AAB working group. All of the actors and humanitarian actors, UN, international organization, even donor and national organization, grassroots organization, they are part of this group. We are discussing at a high level how to deliver the assistance to the people, ensuring the dignity, the protection, and being accountable to them. So we established a good, I can say, a good system. One of them, it's like an interagency system, safe line, where all of the people can reach the safe line. And those people, the operator in the safe line, they manage the referral among the organization. If there is like any type of a trend, they can follow it up based on that. So we are listening to people, and something this is not easy at the beginning, but later on we establish a channels based on their preferredness, and that's different from location to location. But here in the RH hospital, all of our staff are female, just to ensure that the female staff have good access to the services, and we have established, I can say, good monitoring system, even based on the sphere standard on that. Just to make myself like quick as much as possible, because we are running out of time. The most important challenge that we have faced, how to find building meet all of the standards to deliver such type of service because there is no public health facility in Northwest Syria at that time. We forced to take like a private building, rehabilitate this private building, considering the WHO standard list and the sphere standard list. This is the photo for the building, which is operated more than 10 years so far. So the idea, the infrastructure isn't a supplementary, it's like an integral of a sphere compliance. And one example, not to make it so long, the electricity in the area not stable. And imagine that you cannot deliver the services because there is no electricity. So we make like a backup generators and solar system to be for 24 hours electricity for the center. For the core humanitarian standards, all of them have been met with like a checklist. I don't mean like a checklist we are following like a checklist, but we deal with it with the sphere and the core humanitarian standard as a system itself. So for an example, the local capacity and coordination, we are coordinating with it at that time with the Ministry of, now we have a Ministry of Health, but before December 2024, there is like a directory of health. We are coordinating with them, with WHO, with the other stakeholder in the area, and we have provided many training related to sphere, related to core humanitarian standards to the main actors. So when we communicate with them, they understand exactly what we are talking about. So at the end, I can say that the sphere isn't like a checklist, it's a system design. And even it isn't something only the technical one, it's like a protection and other foundations. What I want to say, the last message that I want to say within this presentation, after thanking you for this opportunity, we are really sharing the common sense in the conflict area. And this sense, one of them is sphere. I know Mahmoud, how is suffering in Gaza to provide such type of minimum standards for requirement for each stage. But at the end of the day, we are working for the people and we need to deliver the assistance to them with a dignity and with a protection, even if we don't have like all of the required to be covered. Thanks again for William for this opportunity and Rakul, and over from my side.
Thank you so much, Faris. Really, really kind of you to join us and to share that. It's very inspiring as well, amidst all the pain and the trauma and the hurt. So I'm just going to briefly thank my speakers and just pull out a couple of things. I'm going to share a couple of things about sphere, and then I'm going to ask a question. So, Jonas, you talked about 27 to 25 liters of water, and it's not easy to reach the minimum standards, and that you need more equipment, and that you are the ones on the front line. John, you shared about the many millions who are displaced and millions affected, and you talked about CHS Commitment 3 and how you've been training a community with knowledge transfer and how that community is taking ownership. Mahmoud also shared about the 15 liters minimum standard is not possible, has not been possible for many months, that can only achieve a fraction of that. But not to give up on the minimum standards, not to say that 5 liters is acceptable. It's not. Not to give up on the aspirational standards, the anchors, not to give an inch. And then Dina, you talked about, yes, reminding us that it's 11 years of conflict and 4 years of war. In reality, actually, that many people do not know Sphere, haven't heard of Sphere. I know Felicity, my colleague at Sphere, heard from someone when she was in Poland, someone from Ukraine saying, where has this handbook been for the last 2 years? The real coordination happens locally. And in fact, the minimum standards of the architecture of dignity, which resonated with many in this virtual room. And Faris, you've been sharing about nutrition, the severe acute malnutrition, and how the standards, how that's translated into the work at the moment, both outpatient and inpatient as well, how you've been rehabilitating, for example, a private building into a public health facility. You've all, in your 5 separate presentations, there's been a thread throughout, and some of them, there have been 3 or 4 threads. One of them has been the Humanitarian Charter, and in particular dignity. One of them has been the core humanitarian standard, and one has been protection and access. And those are the three foundation chapters of Sphere, which are absolutely essential in conjunction with the four technical standard chapters. Now, that word dignity, that I believe is at the heart of Sphere. The professionalization of aid is a good outcome, but it's dignity which is at the heart of Sphere, and why Sphere was actually written in the first place. Not about creating a rule book, but about creating, by many thousands of people, a handbook, a practical guide to help ensure people are treated with dignity. And you might be aware of, but if you're not, all the standards are not tied to numbers. They're qualitative, they're not quantitative. They're meant to be flexible according to the local situation. But it's those context-specific indicators, some of which are in the handbook and some of which are being contextualized, which are the numbers. Now, also a key point here is about the word minimum. And you've all brought it out in your separate ways, that the concept of minimum standards means that we are not going to give up on reaching that minimum, that we're not going to give up in the worst of situations where that minimum is not possible. We're not going to give up on making sure that that minimum cannot be achieved, that we advocate for, that we demand, that we say that there is no dignity where we cannot reach the minimum standard. So thank you for really bringing that out in your presentations. Next week, Sphere is launching the revision of the handbook. It needs to be updated. And the launch will be next week on Tuesday, Geneva time morning. And if you're able to log in online, or if you're actually going to be in Geneva, please come to the launch of the revision, but please do join online. Sphere has 6 staff, and I just want to thank the 6 staff who work for Sphere. We're a very small team. 3 of us are based in Geneva. That's Felicity, Tristan, and myself. We have Raquel in Mexico City, Zanera, who's in Karachi, and Patricia, who's in Manila. So I just want to really appreciate all the work that we have been doing and that we will be doing. So, and feel free to reach out to us. We've got time now for a couple of questions. So I'm just going to go around the panel at the moment, and hopefully if you can stay on the line. How do you see the situation, the conflict situation and the humanitarian situation evolving in the next year? And what do you think we should know about the conflict or the humanitarian situation? What should we be aware of? And do you have any advice for what we can do? What we can do where we're sitting all around the world? What we can do to raise awareness, to support you in any way. So I'm just going to go around the panel again in an order. How do you see the conflict, the humanitarian response evolving in the next year? And what do you think we should know? And how can we do anything? So Jonas, if you're there, I'm going to come to you first.
Thank you very much, William. I think that for the humanitarian landscape nowadays, conflict will be remaining a very big crisis in the world, especially for the DRC, for example. We have seen that those who are fighting are not able to negotiate and to have a resolution of the government to stop the war and conflict. It means that people who will be stay in need are many. For this year, for example, the humanitarian response plan demonstrates that around 14.9 million of people in DRC are in humanitarian need. And this situation seems to be changing, and the number of people will be increasing in the country. But I think that when we are talking about this situation, the funding is now an issue because the funding is now reducing. Depends to what has been happening with the US government, USAID. And I think that now we need to be thinking in other ways. By applying fair standards for now, it's an opportunity to engage with states and governments, because when you go through the humanitarian charter, the governments are the responsible, number one, to be caring and protecting civilian. You know, sometimes as humanitarian, we're working alone. We don't see the power of governments to be involved in protecting civilian, to be involved in protecting people. This is why sometimes we are trying to responding as a humanitarian, but there is no big impact. This is one. But also we have to push our government to have a budget for responding to crisis, for example. And we have to use fair standards to influencing existing policies, so governments can be developing policies related to protecting people and allocating resources also to ensure that humanitarian NGOs are completed to the government in terms of improving situations. But lastly, I think that this fair standard should be helping us to be using all donors also to make them more responsible in terms of dignity and humanity, for example. Donors need also to be using fair standards as an obligation. You know, William, I think that using standards, while it is like there is no any obligation to use the fair standards, it's also sometimes a problem. But nowadays, accountability to affect the people, it's now an obligation. As everyone needs to integrate fair standards in the system, in existing policies, in existing structures, so to ensure that NGOs, civil society organizations, donors, governments are really integrating fair standards in their policies. And you have also to take the localization as an opportunity, involving more national NGOs, local actors, community organizations, fairs, standards via our technical support, trainings, and so on to ensure that all these grassroots organizations also are also involved in using fair standards in terms of dignity, in terms of equity, in terms of accountability to affected people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonas. I'm going to hand now to John. John, are you still with us?
John is not with us.
Okay. John was joining us from the in Myanmar with on a border situation, and yes, he said he might have to drop off. So we hope he's well. We're going to hand over there for if Mahmoud, are you still able to be on the line and able to respond to my question, Mahmoud?
Yes, thank you, William. I think yes, the humanitarian situation unfortunately would be more complex in the near future, and even it's right now in different areas of the world. So and many new techniques such as AI, unfortunately, support this uprising conflicts all over the world. So yes, humanitarian situations could be more complex, and the conflicts around the world would be more complicated. However, I think we need to have more awareness for decision makers around the world, passing the message that development, building peace is much more cheaper than having these wars. And there is a space for all of us in this earth, and the world can can be accommodated for all. So to work more on no one left behind, to live in peace and to live with dignity out of conflicts and out of wars. I think this is the main message that we need to raise and to insist on, that always the peace voice should be higher and louder than the war word. And I think we need to work more on the triple nexus and always try to treat the radical causes of disasters, particularly the human-made disasters. We need to work more because they are preventive and we can save more lives over the years. Thank you.
Given where you're speaking from, Mahmoud, those words are very powerful, and thank you for sharing. We're now going to hand over to Dina. Back to my original question.
Thank you, William. Well, probably I will oppose Jonas here and say that we don't have to rely on the government, because when the conflict erupts, the government has to deal with the conflict. And what we see now, even in the budgets of Europe and US, budget getting militarized, meaning they spend more money on their military and defense systems. And I had to flee my home in February 2022 under shelling. But why I had this already lived through is because I was prepared. I was getting prepared for this war to start since 2021. And me and my neighbors, we were preparing our basements to be bomb shelters, and we had water over there, and we had proper medicine. And I would say that the only pre-circumstance for us to be resilient, and Ukraine is famous for its resilience, it's not because we rely on government, it's because local communities engage in humanitarian response. And if we see that the Third World War, whatever happens now, the pre-circumstance for this resilience is local communities that are able to respond locally and have their own contingency plans. And that's what we already trying to implement in Ukraine, where the response mechanisms being taught and worked out with local communities. Because this crisis management cycles, it's not ended, but it should go through preparedness phase to get to continuous improvement. So I would say that we have to work with local communities and make them not sitting there waiting for help, but engage in response and help others, their neighbors, their friends, and knowing that it's not only about dignity, but also about being resilient and having this kind of self-help. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to Faris now. Faris, over to you.
Thank you, William. I would say, adding to what my colleague said, we need to work more with the donor, because most of the time, from the experience in Syria, the donor used the humanitarian situation, unfortunately, in a political way. In 2023, I guess, more than 160 health facilities have been stopped within 1 month, and WHO wasn't able even to write like an advocacy letter to those donors. And what happened at that time to proceed with the fund is the earthquake, unfortunately. So we need to advocate with the donor more. They need to send the money to the crises that have been created by human beings. I'm not talking about the natural crisis. But unfortunately, the people who create such type of conflict, they have the authority to stop the fund to those area. We suffered a lot in Syria with the shortage in fund, and sometimes even the minimum standard we cannot reach. Some area we cannot reach them. the OCHA, the other actors try to write like many letters, but at the end of the day, the last decision with the people who have like money. So I agree just to engage and empower the community from inside so they can express themselves. They can type of localization from the area, but I guess we need to work more with the donor at this stage. Thank you, Anubha.
Thank you, Faris. Jonas, I want to give you a right to reply if you'd like to, because Dina mentioned your name on a point. So you're very welcome to reply if you'd like.
Yes, I think that the context should be more different. But when we are referring to the humanitarian charter, the governments and states are the first to have the responsibility to protecting people. As a humanitarian, we are coming to complain what states and governments have already done. This is very difficult in more context of countries. This is for why we need also to push our states, our government, to take their responsibilities. Because sometimes we cannot be giving humanitarian for a long time because resources are limited. And what our states have been also bringing as a contribution to ensure that those communities, affected people, are more resilient, they are more sustainable. In terms of peace, for example, peace building, NGOs cannot bring peace. I think that our states have to take their responsibility and to have a carefully strategical approach to give them their responsibilities so they can be involved in humanitarian cycle management. So this is for why I say that involving our states and the government is also very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonas. Would any of the other panelists like to come in on that point? And while you're thinking about coming in, I'd just like to share a policy essential for Sphere is that we have always and we continue to advocate for the states or the de facto authority, their primary responsibility for humanitarian assistance, protection and security. International humanitarian law is actually about combatants allowing humanitarian aid in, rather than about humanitarians. It's about the combatants have to do certain things for the unimpeded humanitarian access, for local leadership, for continuous community participation. Okay, I can't quite see the screen, but would any of the other panelists like to come in?
I just quoted Humanitarian Charter, sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay, perfect. No, thank you, Dina. Well, I think then I'll just close here. Please have a look at the picture put up by Raquel in the chat. That's about some of the other Sphere-run events. So it really leads me now to say thank you so much to Felicity and Raquel for organizing this event. It's been our privilege and pleasure to be a platform to enable your voices. So for the voice of Jonas, and for sharing, for John, for Mahmoud, for Dina and Faris, we are so grateful that you agreed to be presenters and to be sharers. We've heard from both your heads and your hearts, and it's been very impactful for us, and I know many others on the call. So really appreciate your time, and thank you as well for all those who joined this call. It's been, I think, a very important session, and we have recorded it, and I think we will be using this beyond just this moment from today. So thank you and goodbye, and hope to see you at the revision launch next week.